Hello and welcome back to Rolling the Robsons. Today we're going to talk about our 5 top tips about going to France. Interestingly enough, it's called 5 top tips, but they're actually 6. So you're getting one for absolutely free. We need to talk about going to France as much as Caravan Vlogger, but just not quite, although he might argue about that. I agree. So we're going to talk about the 5 tips that we think, in fact 6 tips that we think are important when you consider where to go in France. Number 1 for us is the budget. Obviously you've got a set amount of money that you want to spend when you go to France, and that will include the petrol costs, tolls, ferries or tunnels, and a lot of things like the site fees and other bits and pieces. So the budget that you set is very much going to dictate where you go. Obviously for us, we're a family of 5 from the northeast, it costs quite a significant amount of money just for us to get down to Dover or Folkestone area and get the ferry across before we even think about tolls and about petrol. The first year we went to France, it cost us the best part of £525 just for petrol and tolls. Our car takes about £80 just to get down to Dover with the caravan, and it took about another £80 to get to the main site, so that was about £160. Then we went back up to Paris, near Disneyland, we kind of drove back up to the northeast, but it also included about £200 worth of tolls. So your budget is going to dictate that the less money you have, probably the more further north you have to stay. That's not always the case, but because of the fuel cost and the toll cost, that's going to add a significant amount of money onto your budget. Compare that to last year in 2019 when we only went down to a place near Troyes and it cost us somewhere in the region of £325 for petrol and toll, so £200 saving. So think about your budget, because that's going to largely dictate where you're going to go in France and also the kind of sites that you can afford when you're in France. Tip number 2 is about the distance. Obviously you've got to think about how far it is for you to travel down to the south coast, wherever you're going to go get the ferry from. Now, you could obviously get the ferry further north, but we found that the costs are quite prohibitive to go from somewhere like Newcastle, near where we live, or even Hull. You could go to Harwich, but we're talking about that in another tip. So what you need to think about is how far are you prepared to travel? We don't want to sit in the car for hours and hours and hours, because the children eventually get a little bit worked up, even with their tablets and books and other things, sit in the car for a long period of time. For us it's around 7 hours just to get from here in the northeast down to Dover. In our first year, because of the place we went, which was just below Tours, it was the best part of 8 hours on the other side. So you've got to think about the distance, and you've got to think about the further the distance, the more petrol, the more tolls, but also the more amount of time you've got to sit in the car. So think about where you want to go, why do you want to go there, what is in that area, and try to go to somewhere that sits within your budget, but also within a reasonable distance that you're not having to travel for hours and hours and hours to get your final destination. So tip number 2 for us is consider the distance you want to travel into France, which obviously has an impact on other things that you might consider while you're there. In 2019, we actually went to a site called Lac d'Orient, which is near Troyes, and the distance and therefore the time is significantly less. Where to get the part of February near Tours, it took us the best part of 8 hours with 2 stops from Calais. We got down to Troyes in 1 stop, and it only took us about 4 hours with the caravan, maybe about 4.5 hours with the caravan, plus it took about 5 hours. So again, a significant saving in time. So think about the distance, because you don't want to be traveling for hours and hours and hours, particularly with young children, unless you're going to have some stops. But we'll talk about that in another tip. Tip number 3 is about choosing your site. There is a wide range of sites you can pick when you're in France. There are the sites in France that have everything. They have pools, they have slides, they have a kids club. They have a lot of facilities for you while you're there. They have nighttime entertainment, they have spas, all that. Obviously, if you're going to pick someone at that end, you're going to be paying a fair amount of money per night. We're actually looking at a site for 2020 where it's nearly £80 per night. Now there's no way I would probably pay that in the UK, but I will consider for my main holiday. So think about, what do you want? For us, with a family of 5 and 3 children, we're thinking about, we'd like a pool, indoor and outdoor, for our main site if we can. We're considering the fact we'd like slides, because when the girls have slides, they often go off for a bit and we get, well, got to be honest, a little bit of peace, and it just allows us to have a little bit of a relax on our holiday. We also wanted to have a little bit of nighttime entertainment and maybe some little clubs for the girls, although we don't always send them. You can go from the other extreme, which is having a municipal site, which is like a local council sort of in a way run site that exists in France, where they're very, very basic, but obviously on the extreme there you might be paying £15 to £20 a night. You can also consider about getting an ASCII card, because that can save you a little bit of money when you're in France, particularly if you're going out of season. So think about, what do you want from your site? Think about the location of your site as well, because you might want to go and see certain things. You might want to go and see things that fit in with World War I and World War II. You might want to go down to the south coast of France for a particular reason. But think about your site, think about your budget, think about the distance you're going to travel and what you want out of the site while you're there. And for us, it is about kind of getting a balance between spending too much money on the site, but also we don't want to spend too little money that we go there and think, well, it hasn't been the best experience for us. So number 3 is consider your site. What facilities do you want so you can get the best holiday for you and your family? In terms of finding a site, you might want to consider looking on a Facebook group that we'll put down in the description below, which we use, which is about French Caravan and camping, but also ask other people's advice. If you're on things like Caravan Talk or maybe one of the other Facebook groups, ask people's opinions, ask maybe people when you go on site, whether they might have heard of places to go as well, and just get a general feel, read TripAdvisor to find some sites that you would like. Just note on TripAdvisor, some people are quite happily going to slate everything that exists in some sites. Number 4 is about breaking your trip down. Now, again, France is a very large country, and what you'll find is something that looks this big on the map may take you several hours. You're limited to 56 miles an hour in France if you've got a total kind of combined weight of over 3.5 tons. I do see some people flying down a little bit, but you don't want to take that risk of getting a fine, because the French police are quite happily fine people who from Britain who are breaking the law, because it's nice and easy to take the fine off you straight away and they've got the money there. So since we live in the northeast of England, we've got to consider about breaking our journey down. We live in the northeast, like we said earlier on. It takes about 7 hours to get there. We've done it a few different ways so far. The first year we went to France, we actually drove down about 4 o'clock from here, 4 o'clock from the northeast. We got to Dover at 11 o'clock. Set up the caravan in pitch darkness, got everything sorted, went to sleep, got up the next morning about 5:30, got dressed, got the ferry, then drove down for the best part of 8 hours. That worked okay, but to be fair, I am the only person that can drive the caravan in our family, so I was a little bit tired and I wish we'd had broken down a bit more. The second year, what we did, just last year gone, is we decided to drive down to Dover. We stayed in the Dover area for 2 nights, and then we drove down with 1 stop to Troyes, because we know it was only about 5 hours, 4.5 hours, 5 hours with the caravan. This year being our 3rd year going to France, we're thinking about doing it differently again. What we're considering this year is driving down, maybe again starting earlier on, maybe 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, leaving, getting to the ferry, or possibly this year the Eurotunnel, getting the Eurotunnel across and driving for 2 to 3 hours into France, stopping overnight, and then possibly going to our main site. That might be something that works for you, but please think about how you're going to break the journey down, how you're going to break down even going from somewhere like the northeast, if that is for you, or maybe somewhere in the northeast, or maybe in Scotland, so you can have stops. We normally stop about every 3 to 3.5 hours, have half an hour, 45 minutes, and get back on the road to give us a bit of a comfort break. So number 4 is about breaking your trip down so that you don't feel too tired, and that when you get there you can enjoy the site and not have to spend 2 days in bed trying to recover. Number 5 is more of a general point as opposed to a tip. What we're saying here is think about how are you actually going to get into France. Like I mentioned earlier on, from the northeast we can go from Newcastle into Amsterdam. We could travel down to Hull and get the ferry from Hull over to Rotterdam or Zeebrugge. We could also go from Harwich and go over. We can go from Dover to Dunkirk or Dover to Calais. We could go down there, I think it's Newport. We can go all the way across to Portsmouth or Poole. There's a lot of ways we can get into France. Now again, your budget will probably dictate where you're going to go. Also, depending on where you're going, like if you're going to a site in the northwest of France, you might decide to go on the west side of the coast because you already get across there. And I have heard that the tolls are a lot cheaper on that side, so maybe it balances out. For us so far, it has been more cost effective to go down to Dover and get the ferry across, because we only end up paying about 200 and last year £300 for the ferry both ways, where sometimes to go from somewhere in Portsmouth to the north of France is sometimes £400, £500, maybe even £600 if we need like a cabin, which we might need with our girls just to get them out of the main areas. So think about where your starting point is and think about where your end point is in France, because that will probably dictate or help you decide where you're going to go from the south coast or from further above to the site you're going to get to. Yeah, one thing I would say is that if you're going to go from Newcastle to Amsterdam or even Hull down, they both sound superb routes and was something what we would really like to try. However, we've looked before and the price is a bit prohibitive in our opinions, but it might be spot on for you if you're driving maybe from somewhere like Scotland, you don't want to drive all the way down to Dover. And our last tip, which you'll realise is actually tip number 6, is to think about when you get there, what are you going to do? You're going to a different country. Now, hopefully you're going to France because you want to experience a little bit of French culture. I've been to France for quite a few years, even before we had the caravan, and I quite enjoy the French culture. I like getting involved and going to see what's going on around the area, going to see the chateaus, maybe a vineyard if that's sort of thing, maybe go out to a fun park with the children, maybe think about going to a zoo with the children, maybe go to see some things to do with the war, maybe go to the local cathedral. Please make sure that when you budget for this, don't spend all of your money on the tolls, the petrol and the site, because then what happens is you get to the site and you actually haven't got any money to go out. You want to try and take in a little bit of Frenchness, as I call it. You want to go and see a local market, you want to go into town and see things and just get some experiences. So when you come back, although it might be great for you, and I've got no problems with people that do this, it'd probably be better if you had some photos of you out and about. And again, it's great if you do have young children to show them photos of where they've been and to talk about them experiences with them, or to show your family members. So tip number 6, and our last tip, is considering what you're going to do when you're there. How can you get part of the culture? Even if it is going to Disneyland Paris, at least it's getting you out the site. Our first year, we actually pretty much stayed in Parc de February, and then we really regretted it when we got home that we didn't take in the experience of France itself and getting used to the French culture. So hopefully that's been useful, our 5 tips that became 6 tips about going to France. Please give our video a thumbs up and a like. We'd like you to put a comment down below, where are you going to France this year, so other people can have a look at that. Possibly why you're going to France and where are you exactly going to France, if you don't mind sharing with us. I wouldn't advise putting when you're going to go, because then people might know you're not going to be in your house at that point in time, just as a safety precaution. And if you don't already, consider subscribing to our video, because we found that only 15% of the people who watch our videos are currently subscribed. That means we've got a whopping 85% of people that never ever subscribe to our videos. So please subscribe and help support the channel. See you in the next one.